Dave Sobel, how's it going, man?
I'm just as good as everybody else, at home and healthy, which is the first requirement, right? So I've hit all those marks.
Well, that's very good. I'm glad that you're home. I'm glad you're healthy. So, you struck me with something. I just had a revelation that you are no longer with SolarWinds.
No, I left SolarWinds back kind of Q3 timeframe of last year. So I've been independent for a while.
All right. So I just started to dabble in the stock market, thanks to this, worldwide pandemic.
Yes.
And SolarWinds is in my watch list. And it's interesting just watching all of these stocks go crazy right now. They're all just, up and down, 10% here, 50% there. I watched one go up like 200% one day. I'm like, what is happening?
The market is crazy. The market is crazy, and I am still a SolarWinds shareholder. So I'll even say I hold some SolarWinds stock. The market's crazy. And people always equate the stock market to the economy, and it is super important to recognize that they are not the same thing. They are distinctly not the same thing. That is speculative about company performance in the future. And if you and thus it's all over the place because there's a ton of uncertainty. Nobody really knows. So it's going to be a wild ride for those who trade stocks.
All right. So, yeah, I've been having fun, losing money left and right.
As long as you're comfortable with that, then trade away.
I've had this is my third day in a row of like minus $100.
Right.
And I'm playing around with like chump change. At one point I had like $1,300 in my Robinhood account. I'm not gambling with thousands and thousands of dollars, right. But I do understand I'm gambling. So
it is. If you look at it that way, it can be, you can look at it and definitely have fun with it. I mean, I think it's an interesting time to be doing that. Obviously I'm invested in the market in two ways. I'm invested in the market from a retirement perspective. I've got long-term investments in that point. And I'm also invested in the market with some stock holdings where, mostly from before that at this point, I'm now just saying, well, let's ride this out and see what happens with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So before SolarWinds, talk to me about kind of what your history was like in the MSP channel.
Sure. So I always like to start with my actual education background so people know like more my perspective is. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. I am I actually have a degree in computer science. Thought I was always going to be a programmer. Started my career as a developer and consultant for a while. So I did that, and I did a bunch of interesting stuff for publicly traded companies, and I wrote some code that's probably still somewhere in a back end for a bank, tying their legacy systems to the web. I did some stuff like that, and then I moved over in modern parlance, because this was a late 90s, early 2000s, but in modern parlance, I helped build a cloud system for online transactions, contract negotiations, including secure digital signatures. I was a product manager for all of that kind of stuff. And that all imploded in 2002 during that market. And the way I always love is we had a pretty good technology and we had awful salespeople. And so the whole technology team lost their jobs, and we lost our jobs on Valentine's Day of 2002. And that's a memorable day for me because I lost my job. I proposed to my now wife, and the next day decided I was going to try my hand at a business because, so it was like implode your life all in the same day. And
that's a good time.
It totally was. And right in the middle of a down economic time too. So this is sort of my third cycle with business trying to do that. So for me, that was when the MSP started. And I said to myself, either I'm going to get a job, I'm going to go back and get a job, or this business thing will work. And we signed our first managed services deal in April of that year for roughly about $12,000 a month managed services contract servicing healthcare providers in the DC metro area, which is where I live.
Yeah.
So not a bad first managed services deal. And that's all in the time. We didn't even call it managed services. We just called it outsourced IT. it had all the basic pieces to it. It was around outcome-based delivery, saying we're going to maintain your network, and here's how we're going to do it, and this is the service level we're going to do it. It included some mostly on-site versions of that. I'll use people to do it because it was 2002. But I pivoted quickly over time to doing it all remotely, and I built that MSP from that first contract until I sold that business at the end of 2011. Did the managed services thing, and I wrote a book on virtualization and how to take that out to the managed services market. I was heavily involved with CompTIA, so I was on the managed services executive council, and I helped found the mobility community. And for those that followed the HTG peer groups, I actually took HTG to Europe. I was the guy who founded it in the UK. So I was kind of all over the map with with all of the community stuff during my managed services time. I loved to speak, would give presentations all the time, did webinars, the whole thing. And then I had that moment kind of the end of 2011 when it felt like the right time to sell. And there was some events in the business that made me think either I'm going to be at this for a while doing some building, or I should use this as an opportunity to sell. And I did. And I always look back and I'm really pleased with the way that transaction went down. I'm still friends with the guys that bought it. The guys over at Network Depot here in the DC metro area bought it. And then I jumped over to Level Platforms. Back when Level Platforms was a thing. And I worked with Dan, I worked for Dan Wensley, and I was co-workers and peers with Rob Ray. So we were the going around building out that that business, and I worked there almost 2 years.
I had no idea that Rob Ray was at Level Platforms.
He was prior to Datto. He was at Level Platforms 8 years or something like that. Wow. And I was there the last 2 or so. Rob and I are to this day still good friends. Worked. He was director of sales. I was director of community. We both worked for Dan. That was a great period of time. It was a great fun to get that over the line. And of course, we sold Level Platforms to AVG. Was the way that went. And then we all went different directions. Dan went off to do some consulting. Of course, now he's been through a couple of places. Rob, of course, went to Datto. And I went to GFI. And my mission there was to do the same thing again, as I was going to build up the community endeavors at GFI. So I went from the GFI Logic Now through the sale to when we sold that business to SolarWinds. And I was with SolarWinds for 3 years. So it was a total of 6 between GFI Logic Now and SolarWinds.
So why did what happened to make GFI turn into Logic Now? What happened there?
Yeah, so it actually, if you understood the mechanisms of what GFI was, it makes a lot of sense. So when I joined GFI, we were considering an IPO, actually. It was pretty close to when that was all going to happen. And Walter Scott, of course, was the CEO, and Walt pulled that back because it wasn't the valuation that he thought he wanted to take it out with. And so instead, what he worked with the investors, and there were 3 divisions to that business. The first was the traditional GFI business. So those on-premise software packages that people were familiar with, the mail protection products and some of the on-premise stuff. There was, at the time, GFI owned TeamViewer, which a lot of people don't necessarily always remember that we owned TeamViewer at the time.
I did forget that.
Yep. And we owned what was GFI Max, which was the cloud RMM division. It was 3 divisions of the business. Walt, who is a freaking genius when it comes to this stuff, he's great at seeing the way these things all get assembled, or in this case, how it gets pulled apart. And what he did then was he sold TeamViewer. He sold off the TeamViewer business for an ungodly amount of money. And then he looked at what was left and he says, the valuable bit is the cloud business. So I'm going to split it again. And he split off the cloud business from the GFI business because he only had 2 divisions. GFI had the name recognition with all of their own on-premise products. So it made sense to keep that branding. And then, of course, he needed a name for the new thing. And he's so funny this way that he looked at his list of stuff he owned. He had previously purchased a product that is now, or was at the time, Service Desk, which was called Logic Now. So he owned this brand and this domain name, and he goes, call it that. I own that. and he took that out, and we became Logic Now, because his plan, unbeknownst at some level to all of us, was to sell that business, which he then did to SolarWinds.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that guy is a genius.
He is. I really enjoyed working for Walt. He's a taskmaster, and I appreciated everything about it when I learned exactly the way he thought, and I learned so much from the experience. But he really gets the way that technology gets assembled and the value of it either combined or pulled apart. He really understands those mechanisms. So that's kind of the short version of that story. That's what happened. And of course, SolarWinds bought it. Walt became for a period of time part of the management team, but then exited the business, of course, and then it got taken over by, of course, Kevin Thompson is the CEO at SolarWinds. John Pagliuca became the general manager for the MSP group, and of course, still leads that to this day.
And today, you're, like you said, you're not with SolarWinds.
Yep.
So what the heck are you doing? Are you just, you're I would say you're, going to the beach every day sipping mojitos. But first of all, I don't think DC has a beach. And second of all, I'm sure all the beaches are closed. So
yeah, both true statements. So for me, if you look at in context of what I did, so I was with SolarWinds for 3 years. The acquisition, of course, now is almost 4 years old. It'll be 4 years in June. And so I was with it 3 years, and I did what I wanted to do. I'd never gone with a company IPO. I always look at these moves from my perspective as a learn. What am I learning and growing on when I make my moves career wise? And for me, I learned a lot going into, it's the biggest company I'd ever worked for. I learned the process of going IPO. I learned what it's like during, what that period of, the silent period is like, the quiet period is like. I learned post. I learned a lot of the mechanisms and what it's like to work for a publicly traded company. But it had reached its point of where I felt like, okay, I'd gotten my experience out of this. I learned what I came here to learn, and it was time to try something else. So for me, what I then said is that I looked at the market and I said, this is a different market than it was the last time I pivoted, because the last time I pivoted was going from an MSP. And I said, what I want to learn is I want to learn a vendor. I want to understand the mechanism, the financials, the how you build that side of the business. And this time, when I looked around the market, I said, it's an interesting time now. There's a lot more maturity. There's a lot of businesses that are mature at all different spectrum. And there's a really healthy ecosystem of sort of what I look at as sort of third party people around it. People like you, Steve, like that are adding real value to the channel with educational content for MSPs, or that are doing that kind of stuff. But when I analyzed the market, I said, what I actually think is missing is I think that there's missing a critical voice of analysis that speaks for the solution providers. I always like to try this triangle now. And I say, look, if you think about the media that covers technology, I'll put it into three buckets. The first is the broad business media, right? Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, there's a whole bunch of people that cover business news, CNBC, all of these people. And they love two kinds of companies. They like big companies and they like consumer-facing companies. They don't tend to really love services companies, and they don't seem to like services companies in the small business. We're hard to see, right? If you think about it. So you don't get a ton of coverage there. If I then go look at the tech media, you've got The Verge, you've got CNET, you've got Protocol, you've got a whole bunch of people, and actually kind of have the same thing. Love big business, love Silicon Valley, love consumer-facing tech, not so much with services, right? Like we don't go there to get insights and analysis. And then if I turn to what I will sort of now call channel press, right? You've got a lot of businesses there that are ultimately actually more events businesses than they are media businesses. if you break down a lot of what companies like Channel Pro is trying to do, what CRN is trying to do, they have some journalism components to it. But a lot of their business is events. Right? Is getting people together for educational content. They are distinctly a mechanism for vendors to deliver messaging out to the masses. Totally a needed space. But I felt like there was a need, particularly with the large amounts of money that have come into our space, particularly with the private equity guys, and then with the growing moves towards regulation and the critical eye technology is taking now that we are a more mature business. Who is sort of speaking truth to power on these? And I said, you know what? I can complain about it, or I can go try and do something about it. And that was my thinking for what I'm doing now. So I decided, I'm going to take my gift of gab and my thinking on the way that I like to present and the way that I like to do data analysis. And I said, rather than kind of go out there and do the thing I might have done, like from a consulting perspective, I'm going to actually start putting out podcasts and video content. And where I look at things about my audience as I want to talk to the business owner who runs a technology services business. Note that I use words bigger than just MSP, because an MSP is a kind of technology services business. I want those guys to get an analysis and information that is thinking about them. So my flagship product, as it will, is a podcast, a daily podcast called The Business of Tech. It is 5 minutes. It is 5 minutes a day so that you can listen on whatever format you want. I'm on Amazon devices. I'm on podcatchers, like whatever you want to catch, to get a couple of stories. And then in my piece that I call Why Do You Care?, which is an analysis of why I think this move matters for technology services businesses. And by the way, that does include the vendors too. I've got commentary and information for the vendors too, because I've run that business as well. So that's what I'm up to now, because I really think we're at a really interesting time. We're a maturing industry. And you can see this in the massive amounts of money that's flowing into the space. But we're also maturing industry because you can also see the eyes of regulators. I did a story recently on the show where I interviewed the Louisiana Secretary of State. And we talked about the breaches that have happened across the state of Louisiana. And one of the things that he was really sharp on was he recognized that a lot of those breaches happened at small municipalities, small local governments, small organizations. And he intimately understood that they were serviced by these organizations called MSPs. He knew the term, he knew the offering. This is the Louisiana Secretary of State, not some guy I would expect like knowing our industry. He knew the difference between an MSP and an MSSP. He knew the differences on why the different organizations functioned the way they did. And what he then did was he had gone to a meeting of fellow secretaries of state, and he told them, you need to worry about these MSPs. They're not protecting you. They're a problem.
I see.
And he has gone so far as to work with fellow legislators in the Louisiana State Assembly there. He's working on legislation to ask MSPs and MSSPs to register with his office after defining the terms. And let me then close this line of thinking by saying to you that the Secretary of State for the state of Louisiana is a pro-business Republican. This is not somebody who I would assume is saying, like, this is not a guy who is heavy on regulation, but right. His statement says, look, if the industry isn't going to regulate itself, we need to step in. That's a serious trend. And so for me, if you ask like what I'm up to, look, there's tons of information and great conversations going on about pricing and strategy and build your business. But I want to have some conversations about this stuff, like the regulation that's coming or what big tech is doing to us as an industry with our privacy problems, or what is the motivation of these big PE companies? What are they doing? Are they adding real value? Are they adding real value to the space? They're all buying up everybody, but have they added anything? Are we holding our vendors accountable to delivering actual solutions? We're the customer, right? We should have these are tough conversations. I want to have those conversations. And that for me is what the podcast and what my media efforts are around.
That's really awesome, man.
Well, thank you.
So what would you say? That kind of stuff is really cool, but I think in my experience, a lot of the little MSPs might not care about stuff like that because they feel like they're going to fly under the radar, you know?
Yep. Well, let me observe that they won't. So there's a couple of, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they won't. So let's even, first off, I just gave you a great example of a lawmaker who is going to move on this space. He's actively doing it. Now, he's having conversations with some of the trade organizations. So it's not that he's just going off on his own. He wants to work with the industry. He's having conversations with the trade organizations that even small MSPs can join for free, can join for free and get involved with, I'll point to CompTIA. You can get involved with CompTIA for free and start having conversations with the trade association that represents us and be part of that conversation. But if you think you're going to be immune from regulation, you're crazy. And additionally, you can see it coming from other markets. I've been having conversations with solution providers and MSPs who are telling me that their insurance companies are now looking at them for their cyber insurance and asking really tough questions about the way they run their business in order to hold them to insure them.
Interesting.
Like, I had one solution provider who was telling me that he was actually denied his renewal because he ran his RMM software on-prem. And the insurance company had determined that was too high a risk and they weren't going to renew him because that's not best practice in their mind. So if you
which is insane because, as MSPs, I think we still love the idea of hosting things on-prem because then we know here we can control the security of this server.
Yeah, I'll disagree and shrug and go, yeah, you can't do better than a large company with armies of people and a NOC. But
I would agree with that and say that most MSPs truly can't.
Right.
But most MSPs think they can. But that's a whole time. We won't go down that rabbit hole. The reason I bring this insurance bit up is that, look, other industries are looking at ours and now determining that we're the risk problem. We're the risk. You've got regulators that are starting to look at the space, go, that's where some of the breaches are happening in these small companies. They're not getting the security level you've got. You've got insurance companies going, the IT providers, how do I know if they're any good? Well, now I'm going to use things like, do they run their software on-prem as a criteria because I've got no way of knowing. We've got pressures that are coming at our industry. You're not going to fly under the radar of that. If your local legislature is asking you to register, if your insurance company is digging into your organization, you're not going to fly underneath those. And you can either let those things happen to you, or you can start becoming informed and understand what's coming. And then we can have actual conversations about this. That's really cool. And remind everyone, what is the name of your podcast?
Sure. It's called The Business of Tech. It is a 5-minute podcast every day. It's designed to make it easy to join, do your business. With all the links are on my website at mspradio.com.
mspradio.com. Everything's spelled the way someone would expect it to be spelled, right?
Exactly. I've owned that domain for like a decade. And when I finally had this idea of taking this out, I was like, you know what? I'll just light that up and that'll be the website that I put things on. And the podcast is The Business of Tech.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. Because these are factors. These are things that I've been having thoughts on pre-pandemic. Like this is all kind of my pre-pandemic thinking. I've got additional stuff post-pandemic, of course, too, the changes to the market. But I don't think that stuff's going away. It may be sidelined for a short period of time while regulators, for example, are a little busier on keeping the economy afloat. But we've all seen the uptake in cyber crime right now. To think that that's going away would be crazy, because those problems are the pandemic is acting as an accelerant on everything. And I think this is just one more trend that is going to get more and more of a problem as the market has matured.
I wish I could disagree with you.
I don't like, this is one of I have lots of statements where I say all the time, I would love to be wrong, but the data tells me I'm right. I've got way too much evidence around this. So for me, I want to spend time thinking about and working on these bigger problems, because that's where we need some collective action. And the first bit really, it has to be education. For me, it's let's come up to speed about the conversations on this stuff around what's going on with regulation, keeping an eye on what's happening in those spaces, getting people thinking about it, having those conversations, and then moving from there. So these big things. The other bit that I link this to is I have lots of conversations around big tech and ethics. Look. This morning, I'm thinking about what I'm working on for the show today. Facebook did a settlement with their content moderators for $50 million. I think it's $50 million payout. Of course, they have not accepted any responsibility for some of the problems with their no guilt or acknowledgement of that. But the problem has been exposed about the way they treat their content moderators via outsourcing. Right. And and everybody might think, well, what does this mean? This doesn't mean anything to me. Well, let's take a look at kind of Facebook, Google, YouTube. Tech as an industry had a pretty great trust rating all the way through 2016. 70% of people surveyed by Pew Research trusted technology and trusted technology companies. Since 2016 to now, it's been a 20-point drop. Wow. In that trust level. Yeah.
That's 20. Huge, man.
It's huge. So when surveyed now, 20 points less number of people, roughly about 50% say they trust technology companies versus 70% we enjoyed for years going into up to 2016.
Wow.
Right. So these big tech companies.
What can we, as incredibly smaller tech companies, what can we do to make sure that we are trusted?
Yeah. So there's a lot of, I look at that and say there's a lot of things that we can do. And the place that I find most interesting is to actually start having conversations with customers about their data, about the way they manage data, particularly their data on their own customers. We've all talked about things like privacy protections, California's privacy laws, or GDPR in Europe, all of these things as like compliance offerings. I look at it and say, you know what, actually instead, why don't we have conversations with our customers about what data they are actually collecting? Not just to make sure we tick a tick box from a compliance perspective, but are we collecting just the right data, not too much data? To help our customers treat their own customers responsibly. And by the way, let me observe, it's kind of hard. I don't mind saying that this is harder work to do, but it's also way more valuable, way more better bill rates, and way more profitable. What do you want to have a conversation about? Do you want to have a conversation with somebody about their antivirus and their security profile and backups? Or do you want to get into their business and talk about what data do you collect? How do you collect data? What are you monitoring on your own customers? Let's make sure that you're only collecting data that you are telling your own customers about that. Oh, and by the way, we're going to do the same things for ourselves. Like our business, this is what we collect. This is what we track. This is how we use it. And we're clear about that so that we can take some stands. Oh, and by the way, then push back on companies that aren't compliant up the stream. And be aware of what those implications are for the big companies and the way they're treating their data and what it means as an industry.
That's fantastic. I love that.
I think there's super opportunity there. Like it's such a better such a better conversation. And let's take this problem and go solve it. Because, by the way, that's what we do, right? As an industry, we services providers have always identified customer pain points and go solve it. Well, here's one, everybody. 20-point drop in trust to technology companies. I can point to the big guys and say, this is their fault, right? They kind of did this to us. Mm-hmm. So let's push back. Let's go help customers understand what data is being collected, give them insight into it, and then get in and make sure that their own business, that they're operating the way that they want to, and they can communicate that back out to their own customers.
So the one thing that I would like to throw out there is this is actually a strategy that I have employed. Looking at, I gotta be careful how I say this because people could take this the wrong way, but looking at my clients' data to help them understand, hey, here's what you've got going on. I have not yet gone into the conversation of let's talk about what you're collecting from customers and storing. But let's take this full circle with my SolarWinds MSP RMM, aka Logic Now, aka GMI, aka Hound Dog. With that, I would use the risk intelligence, and I would run some reports for my clients, and my clients have loved it, man. I've actually said, hey, how about I run some risk reports for you? I don't charge them. I mean, what's an extra $1 or whatever it is per workstation for the whole month to run some risk reports? And then sit down with them and just go over the report. And I can even explain to them, hey, here's some metrics of where we came up with these numbers as far as what it actually would cost you if you had a breach. Here's I believe it's the Poneman Institute. Is where we were able to show some numbers. I keep wanting to call it the Pokemon Institute.
It is, as a gamer, it's a good reference. Yeah, they've got it because they've got numbers that you. What you're doing then is attaching the potential value of a breach against that data. What I would say is, look, go the next step, the additional level of value you can deliver is say, let's talk about what you actually need to be collecting and make sure we're purging the stuff that we shouldn't have, because we can reduce, we not only are reducing our risk, we're going one step further and we can communicate with our customers. This is what we collect about you. This is how we use it. And this is what we do with it. What actually you do find is most customers, when you explain to them what you're doing with data, tend to be pretty comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. It's the lack of knowing or finding out later that you did something with the data that are getting these companies into trouble. That's always been the problem. We at some level don't mind giving some data in exchange for value. Like, for example, I use Google Maps, right? I don't mind giving them the data in order to get map data, in order to get directional data. What I don't like finding out is that they then sold that data down the road, to somebody that I wasn't aware of. If I knew about it at the time, I'm probably comfortable with saying that. It's the surprise later. So just don't do those things and take on the problem directly.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that really, really upsets a lot of people, especially I find MSPs are actually the ones that are most sensitive and paranoid about their personally identifying information. And I think it's because we as MSPs have seen what all the bad guys are doing out there with it, and even some of the good guys. And not to say that the good guys are doing bad things. They are just doing things that I don't want them to do.
Right. So take that vigilance, take that perspective, and make it into an asset. You talk about like how do you make yourself trusted? Take that vigilance and make it an asset, and talk about it and promote it and take it out. And I like talking about this kind of stuff because this is way higher value than the stuff that we like to debate, right? Like I was laughing at one of my rules for myself was I was never going to sit in another MSP pricing panel as long as I live. I'm just not interested.
Let's do it.
Right. Nope. I have no interest in it. I will never participate again. I do not care. There's 5,000 books, including Carl's probably written 3 during the time that we've been recording this podcast because the guy writes more books than anybody. But that's covered territory. There's so much information covered territory. I like this conversation because this is like seriously high value stuff. This is the stuff that when we talk about data management, big consulting firms charge hundreds of dollars an hour to big customers to do this kind of analysis. Now, do I think that a typical MSP is going to charge hundreds of dollars an hour to their smaller customers? I don't.
Yes.
I'd love them to, but I don't think somebody's walking in there with a $400 an hour rate kind of thing, talking about these kinds of things. But do I think they're premium? Absolutely. This is the kind of stuff that we're not quibbling over rate. This is, you're the expert. There's nobody else out there doing this smart, not at that level. You're blowing away your competition by having conversations like this. We're not comparing MSP plans at that point. You're the only guy on the block having the conversation about, well, I'm going to analyze your data and I'm going to make sure that we're talking about what you're actually leveraging and what you're not and what we ought to throw out and how we ought to have compliance statements to your customers to show your real value and expertise. That's totally new territory.
So I know you said you'd never be part of a pricing panel again, but I do have to ask you.
Sure.
A philosophical pricing question.
Okay. All right.
So would you agree that what we do is absolutely mission critical for many types of businesses?
Yes. Oh, 100%. Again, and I will even extend that by saying the reason I'm interested in regulation at the level that I am is because I have always thought our industry has to make a choice at some point. We're going to go one of 2 directions. Certification of a business is coming. It is comical to me that we as technology industry have gone as long as we have without having to be regulated at some level. Now, who do you want to be regulated like? Do you want to be regulated like the plumber or the car repair guy? Or do you want to be regulated like the doctor or the lawyer?
And that's exactly where I was going, man, because right now I feel like we're charging plumber and car repair rates.
And we're acting like it too, by the way. We're acting like it too, because it's easy to hang up a shop, right? And hang your credential out the door and say, I'm a car repair guy. And by the way, no disrespect to car repair guy. That's a skill I can't do. But they don't charge the level that a lawyer does, right? Or a doctor does. Like that's right. A whole, and we're, or an accountant. Right. Another great example for us is accountancy. And they're all regulated by state, local, even federal government. They have gotten involved. They have created their own regulation, self-regulation, and had it become institutionalized. We're crazy to fight it at some level because the premium rates are at that level. Do you want to be
but won't that also mean our insurance rates are at that level too?
Yeah, but if you're billing 5 times as much as you were billing because you're that much more, I don't mind that.
And that's where I was going though, because like if what we're doing is so important, why aren't we charging $400, $600, whatever an hour for our consulting services?
So this is where we get to your statement around the little guys banding together kind of stuff. We've got to look at this in our own self-interest because the people serving us don't necessarily benefit by this. So let's pause for a quick moment, and I'm going to pick on vendors. And I'm going to do it generically because I'm not going to pick on anybody in particular. But a private equity-backed vendor has no interest in this happening in our space. Why? Because it limits the number of people they can sell to.
Gotcha.
So any community effort by any of these private equity backed companies has no interest in what I'm talking about, because it's a limiting factor to them in terms of selling. It's not in their best interest for us to do this as an industry. So they're not going to advocate on our behalf.
Now, with that said, with the public companies, and I'm going to say like SolarWinds, only because they're public, not because I'm saying SolarWinds would do anything like this.
Sure.
This is in their best interest for there to be regulation, because then that means they also get to charge a premium.
I think I could safely say it is not in most large publicly traded technology companies' business. And let's use instances again, like Microsoft, for example. Microsoft might be Microsoft, Amazon, guys that are building out large businesses like this, having the direct partner businesses become regulated, I'm not necessarily certain is good for them, because it becomes a much more difficult market for them to get into, because it becomes regulated in the same way, say, healthcare does. But I do think it can be very good for the services companies. That's where my head's at, is that from a services company perspective, it will raise. We all talk about making, we want to raise the bar of entry, right? We don't like it that anybody can hang their shingle out. But we have to, in order to raise the bar on that, we've got to put some restrictions on it. And that comes from self-regulation, if nothing else. Now,
I know a lot of people would say having our industry regulated, guys like Microsoft and Amazon would absolutely love that, because, well, maybe Microsoft anyway, because a lot of MSPs think Microsoft is doing everything they can to get rid of partners. They're making it really easy for businesses to work directly with Microsoft, and they want to do away with partners and all this other.
They're crazy.
Yeah, I think they're crazy. I think there's too many SKUs for the end user to want to try and figure out what to buy.
I think so. My statement is I don't think at all that Microsoft is anti-partner. I think Microsoft is actually very pro-partner, particularly when I look at them. And if their main play is cloud, right? We know that we know that that's the way Microsoft's all in on the cloud. They really mean it. Mm-hmm. So that when I have to put them, so then I'm looking at Microsoft, Amazon, Google as the players. Of the three, come on, Microsoft is clearly the one that cares about having partners of those three. If you don't think Microsoft is interested in partners, what you're probably saying, and I say this with love of our space, they probably aren't interested in you more because you don't align with their business. If you're interested in selling Azure, man, they love you. They love you. They will fall all over themselves to help you and build that business. And they want Azure business more than anything. They're going at it hard. If you're in the business of selling O365 or now Microsoft 365 and any of the related cloud services, they love you. They are totally in. If you're just interested in selling Windows licenses, they're not so interested. And that's where it comes down to. And I say that with love, but I put on my analyst hat a lot here and go, look, I can tell you that the sky is all wonderful, but if it's raining on you, somebody needs to say that. And so, I say these things because I'm not in the business of serving up an audience as to an event or lead or whatever it is. I'm in the business of providing some actual analysis. If you find value in it, I want you to listen to my stuff. There's ways of supporting and getting involved, but that's the bit. Actually, is for me, it's about growing an audience. And people always ask me, David, how do you make money? I laugh and go, I actually sell old school ads.
Really?
Yeah, why not? Because I believe there's value in it. I was a vendor for 8 years, right? There's actually no way for me to get out a timely message as a vendor to a group of people. Think about it. If I want to make an announcement as a vendor, where do I do that. You guys don't listen. Nobody reads their email anymore. I've got it like everybody is trying to get these bits out. Why can't an actual 30-second ad that tells you something be of value? I think it's totally valuable. I would listen to if it was, because I don't need to sit through yet another webinar, which is an hour of garbage content by a couple of marketers, which is really just a long, it buries the offer around all of this garbage value add stuff. What I really just need is the 30 seconds. Tell me what your offer is. I sell that. You can buy a 30-second ad on my show because I think there's value to that. And so I look and say, look, in my show, there's one ad spot. There's only one ad spot. It's a 5-minute podcast. Can't be that much, right? I'm going to give you 4.5 minutes of hardcore value in terms of I distill all of this news and I ask you to listen to an ad spot so that I can keep the lights on.
That's fair.
It's pretty fair, right? And then I tell the vendors that I'm selling that to, I've got an audience that listens to my stuff. Why? Because I'm putting out actual real content that I work hard on, where I've got expertise in this space and I'm going to deliver some value, and I ask them to listen to my ad. Seems like a pretty fair trade for everybody.
Yeah. So how long does it take you to put together a 5-minute podcast episode?
It's, everybody goes, that can't be that hard. 2.5 hours a day of, and on top of that, it's the look, I'm consuming the news from as many sources as I possibly can to distill down the 2 or 3 things that I think are actually important. And so it's the where I think you can find something for. I freely admit I have biases, right? Like I always say my catnip is data. If somebody brings me a research study where they've analyzed, asked a bunch of people questions and given data, I love those stories because I feel like if we look at a lot of data, we can start figuring out trends. So I'm total for any press handler listening out there, get my attention. You'll get my attention with data. But by the way, there's a million of these reports. Most of the time, there's 1 or 2 quick things you need to know. That's really what it is. So I scour them all and I report on that stuff. Totally, you can see I'm totally interested in regulation, totally interested in those areas. I'm interested in big tech and some of the moves that are happening around those. And I look at the moves of a lot of these vendors to try and understand who's doing what. I will tell you that I don't care that much about M&A. I just don't care. It's because ultimately I don't think M&A matters.
Talks about that.
Everyone talks about it. At the time the M&A action happens, it's completely irrelevant. The product is the same the day before the M&A and the day after the M&A. Who cares? I want to see 6 months or a year later what they've done. Because by the way, every M&A action is exactly the same. Somebody buys something up. It's a revenue roll up. They're going to put out a press release talking about how their innovation is going to now accelerate. They're going to do more for their partners. They're all the same. Mm-hmm. Who cares? Right? A bunch of people just made a bunch of money. Cool. I like that. Right? I'm a capitalist at heart. So I like a bunch of people making money. I hope that the founders make a ton of money. That's always good for them. I applaud those things, but who cares on these M&A things? What I more am interested in is where is this going? What are they going to do 6 months later? Most of the time, these M&A deals, nothing changes. In fact, it usually just slows things down, right? The companies get all bought up. The product didn't get any better, but it also really didn't get any worse. It's just sort of the same. And then maybe they won't do anything. Does get stale, and I think we're not nearly critical enough of that. It's the you buy this product and then you just don't do anything with it forever. I feel like we have to push back, and this is where one of my other things that I think about this a lot. I haven't covered as much on the podcast yet, so you're getting kind of early thinking from me on this. Is it really bums me out the amount of solution providers that I've been talking to that are afraid of their vendors. And what I mean by that is I've had these statements where they get they're focused on, well, what if they take collections from me, or what if they go, like, what if they get angry with me, or what if the product goes away? The answer is you're going to totally do something about it. You're the customer. You are the customer, and your business is not reliant on these tools. It's totally not. I want you to go take a quick look pull up your P&L, everybody. Think about where your revenue and your expenses really come down to. Revenue, 100% of your revenue. Where's most of your expenses? It's in your labor. It's in your people.
Mm-hmm.
That's where your actual expense is. Your tools, what is tools 5 or 10% of your expenses? Maybe?
Yeah.
5 to 10%. Worry about your people. Like, people way more important than these tools. Like, if your RMM miraculously imploded tomorrow, do I think you'd stop serving your customers? Hell no. I think you'd instantly figure something out.
It would probably suck for a few weeks.
Yeah. Well, so did the last couple of weeks, and we all just got through it.
Well, let's talk about the last couple of weeks, Dave.
The last couple of weeks. Yeah.
Last couple of months. So we're in this pandemic, and
yep.
Everyone's either still freaking out because the world's coming to an end, obviously.
Yep.
They're more and more pissed off every day because the economy is collapsing. Because why on earth did we shut everything down? This is stupid. People die from the flu every day. Blah, 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 blah. And then there's people like me who I just want to meet up with some friends, eat some wings, and hug people. Like
I'm because I have my long list of things. I'm with you because it's like, so I'm a baseball guy. I live in DC. I'm a Nationals fan.
Okay.
You know what I was supposed to be at? I was supposed to be the banner raising 2 months ago. I'm desperate to be at a ball game. I also love going to concerts. I'm desperate for live music. I haven't I love to hang out with my buddies. I haven't sat around and had a beer and I had a bunch of beers, but I haven't had a beer in a bar in like having that fun experience. Exactly. Like, I miss those things. I totally miss those things.
Yeah.
And Dave Grohl just did a great piece that came out this week talking about the vibe of a concert, and he ends it by saying it will come back. That you have to be comfortable with this. So I think you've open-ended way to hey Dave, what's your opinion on this? So I very much fall into that your camp on the thinking about. I first off think about and mourn the things that I've lost in terms of the personal stuff, because ultimately, look, we live our lives to live our lives as people, not purely to run a business, right? Like stuff isn't as important as people. We always have to start with that. People are more important than stuff. I like some stuff though. So I'm distinctly in the camp of thinking about this very pessimistically, because that's what the data is telling me. The data is telling me we're in a marathon, not a sprint. I did a video recently where I talked about the Stockdale paradox. You've read Jim Collins' Good to Great, or certainly familiar with it?
Familiar with it.
Okay, so great book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But in there, Collins talks about James Stockdale. Now, James Stockdale was the highest ranking prisoner of war during Vietnam. He was in prison for 7 years. And they talked about, they asked him, how did you survive? And he goes, well, you have to know that it will end. You have to believe that it will end. And you have to own your reality. You have to own the existence now, knowing that now is horrible, but knowing that it will end. And he was asked to follow up. He goes, well, who didn't make it? And he goes, oh, the optimists. The optimists didn't make it. And what do you mean the optimists didn't make it? He goes, well, the guys that would say, well, we'll be home by Christmas. We'll be home by Easter. We'll be home by the next. He goes, they died of a broken heart because the holiday would come and they wouldn't get rescued and they'd lose all hope. And so the Stockdale paradox is the idea that you have to simultaneously hold the reality of your current situation in your mind, yet at the same time, never lose hope. Not lose hope that it will end. The data tells me that we're in this for a while. That this is so I'm going to throw out some bummer data because we got to start from a data point. You know what the record is for the fastest creation of a vaccine in human history?
Like a year?
4 years.
4 years.
4 years is the record.
Wait, there's companies already getting greenlit for like vaccine trials right now.
For trials. But what I mean by that, by saying 4 years, is from it being from the beginning to it being approved. The record is 4 years. Now, I want to give you some good news. The good news on that is look, the experts that are talking about this say, look, there's been a lot of advancements and we're throwing way more resources at this than we have ever thrown at a vaccine creation because it is such a different scale that we're talking about trying to create a vaccine to a global pandemic where previously we've created vaccines for, smaller things, right? Mm-hmm. So the amount of researchers working on it was less. The technology is better. We are moving faster on different trials. There's all kinds of reasons to think it likely will be sooner than 4 years. I take comfort in a dear friend from college, actually works for the NIH, works on the infectious diseases group, casually said at a virtual happy hour recently, well, I emailed something to Dr. Fauci and he didn't get back to me quite as fast as I was hoping for an answer. That made me feel really good because he's a super smart dude. So but I know he's my good friend has sort of said, like, look, we're throwing different resources at this than we've ever thrown at before. Right. So you should expect some different reality. But I throw out the 4 year data just to say, like, everybody who's looking at this sort of saying, oh, I'm worried about the next, are we coming back this month or next month? I don't think you're thinking in the right time frames. I just don't think you're thinking in the right time frames. I look at the consumer confidence data. And I did a piece this weekend and 72% of people are not ready to send their kids back to school.
Wow.
Right.
I'm ready to send my kids to boarding school.
Well, fair enough. But if I layer on the health risk stuff, we're gonna get less quippish, right? Because I totally get it. Like, I want to get out of the house. But when you start layering in health and safety, which, by the way, is something as business people we've never had to think about. We've never sat around thinking, like, is the customer too afraid to do this? Mm-hmm. Like, I've never asked that question before. And so Jay McBain had some new data that came out on Friday that I covered on the show. Jay is talking about the fact that he believes a quarter of all solution providers will get unrecoverable financial distress, is the way that he phrased it. And I thought it was like, that's the greatest way to say going out of business that I've ever heard. Unrecoverable financial distress.
And you said a quarter.
A quarter.
And to clarify, this is a quarter of the MSPs and IT consultants?
Yeah, are going to go out of business because they're not going to be able to survive the economic time. IDC had some new data talking about a 10% reduction in IT spending globally. They are making prediction. They're talking about data that extends. Their prediction sort of talks about. They're talking about no recovery in Q2, extended slowdown Q3, Q4. If you dig into service leadership's metrics, and by the way, I'll plug them all the time. Service leadership has a 57-page document on analyzing and doing they call it the rapid recovery guide, like their guidance for solution providers on how to buckle down from a financial perspective. They've given the resource away for free. You should go get it. And there's a 20-minute video that goes along with it that walks you through the data. But if you look into the financial projections, the recovery on revenue like doesn't come back to your 2019 levels till like 2024, something like crazy, something like that. I say all of this bummer data not to like totally bum you out, but to like to actually ask everybody, I want you to get into marathon mode rather than sprint mode. I want you to take the lessons of the Stockdale paradox and not focus on this idea of, well, are we going to reopen this month? Are we going to reopen next month? Are we going to reopen tomorrow? And start saying, you know what? I'm in a marathon. I'm going to start looking at how I can run my business in a healthy way, assuming things are going to kind of suck. Like assuming that, because if we outperform, that's great, right? That's fantastic because you're doing better than your plan. But if you start working, and that way you can be wonderfully delighted when things go better. But if you're building a plan that is pessimistic and working it and work your plan and assume and be cash tight and be like super careful about what you're doing, I think you can be in the 75% that make it. But I really want everyone to focus on that versus this idea of lurching and ups and downs. And I don't want you to be the prisoners that were like hoping for Christmas and don't make it. Because I think it's important for us to wrestle with this idea that it's bigger than we think. It probably is a lot bigger than we think. When we're comparing it against things like the Great Depression, the Spanish flu of 1918, like these are just bigger things. And it's hard. Humans have a tough time with big numbers. And so it's okay.
I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, and I sometimes have to think about how, because this is difficult. All right, so Ohio, I've got a haircut scheduled. The place I go, they'll be open this weekend. They're getting me in on Wednesday next week. I'm counting down the minutes, Dave, to when this is.
Oh, I know, I'm with you. So this is all about calculated risks.
Okay,
right? It's about calculated risks. You're going to be, and I lament the fact that we have not come together as a collective nation, if we're talking about it from an American perspective, because I do look globally too. I've got background that way too, so I like to analyze other countries' responses as well. But if I think about it from an American perspective, I'm disappointed in us as a country that we have not come together to work on this problem. That I think we should all be disappointed in that, because ultimately we're Americans first, right? We're Americans. Not Republicans or Democrats, or we're Americans. We're supposed to be working together on this stuff. So we should be disappointed in that, but that doesn't mean that we can't work on it. Now, what I would tell you is you're going to be making a series of calculated risks, right? I'm with you. Like I feel like a haircut's important, right? We're both guys that live on video too, right? So it's like, it's bothering me. But will I go?
I am this close, Dave. I'm this close to just doing it myself.
I've done twice. I've trimmed up twice.
When I do it myself, I'm going to take a 2 to the whole head.
But I will also observe, let's just be realistic, right? I used to go get my hair cut roughly every 4 weeks. I don't expect to be on quite that schedule anymore. I'm probably going to hold out a little bit longer, right? It bothers me now. I haven't gotten a haircut since February and it's May. So like it's bothering me. But you know what? I've kind of taught myself that I can go 8 weeks. It's probably, I can spread it out a little bit. And the reason we're using this example is your customers are thinking this way too, right? They're going to be making decisions to extend things, to be conservative. They're going to be making calculated risks, and everybody is going to be weighing that. There's a bunch of things you're not going to do. If I told you right now, would you go to a baseball game with 40,000 people? Right.
No.
Right. Exactly. So
but I'd go sit in a salon and get my hair done.
Exactly. So what the reason I bring this all up is that I want everybody to be realistic. I totally agree that there are lots of things that we can start figuring out how to do. I also think that we need to figure out the ways to do it that do balance that smartly. We're super smart group of people. like we have, and one of a commentator that I like to listen to always talks about America's superpower being our optimism and our ability to execute. Right?
I don't think we're there right now, man.
Well, but we can work on that. But it is about also it's again balancing that realism. I think that we need to be looking with a critical eye to all of these kinds of things, and then try and think about this in a patient, long-term way. I'm using baseball a lot on this as my analogy because I think it helps. Right? I know they will play baseball again. Right? I know they will play baseball again. I will see it happen.
But I'm also 2022 season is going to be fantastic when they get
exactly. But note I didn't even say a number. Right. I look forward to a year. I look forward to being back, and I will watch that first pitch, and I will cheer like nothing else. But you know what? It'll come back. Yeah. I just have to be patient. I have to recognize that is a want, not a need. And then I have to focus on the things that you can take delight in. I can do cool stuff, right? Like I can still talk to friends. I can still work on interesting problems. I can work with interesting customers. We can deliver additional value. We can go out there and we can try and help, we can help people grow their business, or we can help them figure out how to survive this. That's a victory in itself. I look and say, if I'm going to look at this period of time, and if people call me at the end of this and go, Dave, I listened to your stuff and you were kind of a bummer at times. But you know what? I took it to heart and my business made it. I'm going to pump my fist, because that can be success. Right. Absolutely. And so you just have to kind of, you rebalance a little bit. And no, I mean, the reason we started this whole conversation off with are you healthy? Is just hey, that's the stuff that matters, right? Mm-hmm. Are you at home? Your family healthy? Your kids okay? Parents are focus on the stuff that ultimately does matter. You can take a lot of comfort out of that stuff. But from a business perspective, I'm telling everybody, long term, everybody, buckle down. The ones that survive are the people that are going to be cash conservative, who are, I'm not saying don't spend, I'm saying cash conservative. You're going to be really careful on where you invest. I think there are places to invest. There are things that you can do. For example, I'll say with a smile, I'm marketing, right? I didn't turn off my marketing engine. In fact, in some places I'm spending more because costs have come down and I can actually try and get out there and reach the right people with the right message. But am I doing equipment upgrades right now? Not if something doesn't break. As I'm being careful about my cash to make sure that it's spent in the right places, thinking long term.
So I want to dial this way back.
Cool.
way back. I'm going to lighten this up. All right. So I'm going to switch the camera over to look just at you. And I see so many cool things, man. So many cool things. So you've got, what's that? The old school, the old school Nintendo VR thing behind you?
It is. So, all right. So this is, by the way, this is one of 3 cameras in my office. So if we get super cool, I might be able to switch it. So I recently redid my home studio to highlight a lot of my kind of museum pieces.
Yeah.
I'm a retro video game guy. About 6-7 years ago, I started collecting again some of that old school gear. So behind me when I do these calls are some of my favorite museum pieces. So you're exactly right. You spotted the Nintendo Virtual Boy. It's what it's called. Render. You put that on the table. You put your head into the goggles. It's got a controller. It works. Totally works. You can play it. I've got a few games for it. Next to it is the Nintendo Power Glove. That ridiculous glove that was part of it. I have my first 2 computers. On one side is my Commodore 64. Directly, there we go. Behind my head is the bread box itself. Again, all works. So I could fire that up and play video games on it. On the other side is an Apple II GS. that is, we had those in my high school, and I learned to program Pascal on those and some C++ stuff on Apple IIgs machines. I've got up above on the shelf, I've got some Overwatch statues. I've got a Nationals little bobblehead. There's a Sega Genesis Mini, and then on this shelf there's a SNES Mini. That. Yeah, it's off screen, but on that shelf above it, you can see it on some of my videos on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
You can spot some of the things on the shelf there. And then I don't know if I know how to do it exactly on Skype on the fly, change a camera. Let's see.
I think if you hover over the video.
There, where are we? Oh, that's the other angle. My third camera is not working right today. So this is the other angle on my office. So that comes in from this side.
I just lost all video from you.
Let's put it back.
I wonder if you need to turn off video, switch camera, and then turn it back on. No, now you're back.
Maybe. If I were to go the one camera that isn't working, on that wall are all my retro video game rigs. There's a HD flat panel and an old school CRT, like a proper like Sony professional one, like from a TV studio that I rescued, and then working all the Nintendo lines, so Nintendo, Super Nintendo, N64, like GameCube, like the whole line, Wii, the whole line. I've got classic Xbox, like Xbox 360. I have an Intellivision, a ColecoVision. What? I have a Sega Dreamcast. I've got a collection of all the Nintendo handhelds. I have an Atari Lynx. I have a Sega Game Gear. And lining the ceiling is another shelf that has all the cartridges. So my whole I have a personal blog at IHaveARateForThat.com where
so cool.
I have a blog post that actually walks you through the home studio and all of the retro gaming gear. So yeah, I've been collecting that stuff for a while. It all works. Everything's been restored. You can turn everything on right now. We could put a cartridge in and play like here in my office.
That is so cool. Now it looks like you got a 360 or an Xbox One next to you.
So next to me is my gaming PC rig.
Okay.
Now
those are just Xbox controllers for your gaming PC.
Well, there's an Xbox 360 tucked into the system that I can play on this TV.
Okay.
But there's also a Xbox controller for this rig. Now, I'm going to blow everybody's mind by saying my gaming rig is a little hockey puck that connects to the internet and fires up a rig in the cloud. So I've gone completely cloud for I'm a Mac guy actually. So the machine we're talking on is my Mac. Nice. My PC rig is by a company called Shadow. They are at shadow.tech. Yeah, I've been a subscriber of theirs for almost 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. 4K streaming PC gaming works great.
So talk to me about that, because I've like looked into it a little bit. Like literally I saw it, I think maybe last night on Apple News. I was like, what is that? Like, I've heard of this stuff and I forgot it existed, you know?
Yep.
So you pay a monthly fee and it's just a computer and you still have to buy the software?
Yes. So it's essentially VDI for personal use, right? But it is tailored for performance PC users and particularly gamers. So I have a dedicated Windows 10 instance that I am an administrator on, that I install my own software on. So I've been Overwatch. I play some Overwatch. I'm not good, by the way. I always start with I'm not good at the games that I play, but I enjoy them. I was playing Overwatch on PC. I moved it to Switch just because I had to like my Switch a lot. But I play that. I play Guild Wars 2. I play some Star Trek, a little bit of Star Trek Online, little Champions Online. I was playing Star Wars: The Old Republic for a long time. Play all of those. I can install my own Steam, all the games. I install them on the machine. I fire it up. I have their little, they call it the Shadow Ghost, which is a little hockey puck thing, which connects my keyboard, monitor, mouse, my cabling, like the audio, and it's got an Ethernet line, and I do everything Ethernet so that I'm, getting rid of the Wi-Fi problem. And I get 4K streaming gaming.
And you don't have a lag or anything?
I do not notice. The reason I always start with these, I'm not good enough because it's like maybe there might be some pro gamer that could tell the difference. I can't. It does not bother me. I have on occasion gotten that pixelation effect, where like the same thing that you might see on a Netflix. Right. But that's so rare as to I can think of 2 or 3 times in all the times I've used it. And most of the time it's just perfectly seamless. So, and I think I pay $24 a month for this.
It's really not bad.
It's really not bad. Not for a machine with like a full, and I want to say I've got 12 gigs of RAM in my dedicated machine and whatever the highest end NVIDIA card that it can be on that. It works great for my needs. Yeah. So that's my PC gaming rig.
So you said you're a Mac guy. I like you so much more already. So am I. I'm in my Mac.
Yep.
I lost my question. Dang it. Oh, you said you've got 3 different cameras. So what are you using for cameras?
So I'm still the Logitech 920s, the C920s. I have 3 of them here. I've always really liked them. I think, I take the time to get the settings and the white balance stuff right. I use, you probably see on screen, I'm pretty well lit. Lighting matters. My office is entirely set up with hue lighting. So I will show off for a moment and flip the button. Like I can dynamically change the lighting. So what I've done is I've got nice yellow warm light on my front. I've got blue light to the back that dims my background so that my face stands out. And the light is all indirect. So it's hitting the wall and then coming on to me. And I have the advantage of my wife is a video producer. So she can come in and go, oh, you have to tweak this with your light. Or if you do this with that, you'll get better stuff. So that's why I always say you work with pros on some of these bits.
So I too have fancy lighting. I'm still trying to play around and figure out like what makes sense. But I went out and I got Elgato key lights. So I've got this light here. This is my actual key light, and I can do a dim on it. I can change the temperature of the light.
Yep.
I keep it at 6500. And then I've also got a fill light. And my goal is to try and get a more cinematic look on the lighting, which is why both of them are different. They're even different. Like I can touch this one. That one's so far away. That one's like 5 feet away from me. I couldn't touch it if I wanted to. Yeah.
The other thing about my design is if you've seen any of my YouTube videos, they're not this. Like I do full stand-ups. I've got a teleprompter rig that I do for that, for some of that kind of stuff. Like I'll stand usually like over there or sometimes over here. If we get into the nerd stuff, like just for fun, I've invested in, I bought a pair of those retractable clotheslines for hotel rooms. And they're mounted on the walls in 2 very strategic places, so I can pull a line out, and then I can clip quilts onto them, and that can act as sound deadeners if I need sound deadening for certain ways that I do things. They can also block. I have one little basement light in here, a window at least, and so I can block that if I need to. There's a blackout curtain. So I've really spent some time to think about how are the ways that I can use all the different angles for different stuff, depending on the kind of video that I want to make. So normally I do my stand-up editorial pieces, with either kind of that corner or this center as the background, and I do calls like this, with this kind of look.
That's awesome. So this camera here was a C920. It is now a Sony Alpha 6400, which is why I can put my hand up, and you see, I guess I should change. I can put my hand up here and you'll see it is still focused on my face because I've got it in manual focus mode and it doesn't care what I do. And then I also went as far as, they've got those Elgato Stream Deck devices.
That's what I have. I have one on my desk here that I use for that.
So I was like, I can't justify a couple $100 for one of these awesome things because I can't buy the little one. got to buy the big. You got to go bigger or home, man.
I do have the 15 button one.
Yeah, so I would get like the 30 button one because why not? I don't know what I would do with it, but I would get it.
So I tell you, the 15 does fine because it's actually context sensitive. It can switch based on what app you're using. So I find that the 15 works just perfectly for me. But you've got yours on your phone.
I've got the Stream Deck app, which again, I'll bring up and you can't see it at all. But if I hold it back here, you can see it's even got little previews of what we're doing.
Very cool.
So I'm using Ecamm Live.
Okay.
And I'm only using it to record. I'm not using it for the streaming features. Eventually I might get there, but for now I'm just not comfortable doing like a live stream with it because I would rather. So with Zencaster, we're doing individual tracks. So I'm able to download my audio and your audio. I pop it into Logic Pro 10. I do my post-production to it. And then I pop everything in the Final Cut and I finalize it all. And then I can put it up on YouTube, Podbean, and then Podbean kind of disperses it everywhere to Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Like I'm freaking everywhere, man. It's awesome.
Yep, well, I've got the same system for the podcast. I have been doing some live stream. I did some live streams for a while. And I'm totally capable of doing them and ready to do more of them. There's an element of I'm trying to understand what the space needs and wants. To do a little of the why, because the tech is super fun, but the why, I really am trying to I don't want to compete with people that are doing MSP growth, MSP advice, like that, like the stuff you're doing. We both know there's a bunch of players in this in the space that are trying that stuff, and I think you guys are all doing really interesting stuff. And I look and go, I could be there, but I would feel like, I would be doing a Me Too play. And I said, you know what, I want to try something else, and so I'm looking for the space of, where can I add value that is uniquely the voice that I'm trying to get? You can see that, we talked a lot at the beginning about these hard questions, like that you almost have to embrace that full time if you're going to take that on. That's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of research. I'm tracking down, politicians, and I'm trying to track down trade organizations. I'm not quite comfortable with the phrase journalist yet. I still like to say analyst for what I do, but it has too much journalism in it now, and that requires a bunch of time. So I would be if I want to do that well, I've got to put a bunch of time in on that. And so I feel like I can augment what guys like you are doing by being the guy that you can call and say, well, Dave knows 50 stats on this. I need that expertise for this problem. And I feel like I'm a better use there to augment what you're doing versus trying to do something of that of my own, where I can go much deeper in these certain areas. And then I look to say, how does the audience want to consume it? That's where, for me, podcasting was a great place to start. I added the editorial videos. I've been kind of doing one a week of these videos that I release both on the podcast or as a YouTube video. And I also probably, if people have been watching me, I release the snippet videos daily that are generally across all my social platforms, where you can get a piece of a story to hear oh, that's what he's up to today. And then there's a link to listen to the whole episode. Yeah, because I've been really trying to think about what the community wants. I'm ready. I would do live streams if on a regular scheduled basis, if that's what the community wants. But I don't want to live stream just for the sake of live streaming. The flip it on just to be on. It's what does the community want? If the community wants me to do a Q&A or sure, I'm ready to do all of that kind of stuff. It's just a matter of what the listeners are looking for.
That's really awesome, man. Well, hey, we've been at this for an hour and a half already. I don't know about you. I would love some lunch. So I say anytime you want to come back here, Dave, and talk about pandemic or M&A or pricing or
well, I tell you what, let's challenge. Let's make this, because for me, this is ultimately where this all goes. I really think about myself now as I am the analyst for solution providers that you can't afford, right? You can't afford a guy. You can't go to Gartner. You can't go to Forrester and get a question answered by one of their analysts by going that route right now. If you're a typical MSP, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can call me.
Yeah.
That's what I do. Is I want to hear from the audience. I want questions. I want to hear from my listeners. What do you need me to be looking into, providing analysis? Because I think that there's value for everybody. My tagline on the website is voice of the solution provider. That's what I think about as when I think about who my audience is, who I'm delivering value to. It's, you need a guy to ask that question to, and you want an opinion. I've got those. And I'll tell you why I have that opinion, why I feel that way, where the data is coming from, and then give you my recommendation. If that's helpful, great. And if you don't like it, tell me that too. I don't sit over here saying like I'm right on everything that I do. If somebody is listening and saying, Dave, you are totally wrong, and here's why, I so welcome that. Like, I want to hear that. I'm not sitting over here saying I have all the answers. What I'm saying is I'm advocating on your behalf. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you want me working on, and let's make this a conversation. Let's speak truth to power. There's a lot of big companies. There's a lot of money in this space. If you don't want to say it, I will. If you're a small little solution provider and you're scared to say something, I'll say it. I'm happy to say it, right? Like, so you need somebody standing up for you. That's what I'm up to.
That's awesome. Well, guys, check out Dave's podcast. Go to mspvoice.com.
MSPradio.com.
I'm sorry, mspradio.com. I got voice, voice of the solution provider stuck in my head from earlier. So yeah, mspradio.com. I'm sorry, Dave.
All good. Absolutely.
Go check that out and check out his podcast. You do it every day?
I do it every single day. I'm having fun.
These recordings today, man.
I do a podcast every single day, and I do the weekly Killing It podcast with Carl Palachuk and Ryan Morris too. So, and that's a weekly one. So yes, but I do the 5 minutes every single day.
All right. Well, I think maybe you and I will have to discuss collaborating on something as well.
Anytime, Steve. I'm totally up. Anytime you need anything, let me know. I'm happy to help out.
Thanks, Dave, so much for popping in there. Go play with your Nintendo glove.
I'm going to have lunch, and then I'm going to play some games.
Awesome. Have a good one, man. Take care, everybody.
You too.